Guys, welcome back to another Swift tutorial. Today we're going to be building a countdown application for iOS, of course written in Swift. And before we get started, just a quick overview of what the app is going to do. So basically it'll let us add a time in the future, rather time and date. It might be a significant date like a wedding or a birthday. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show a countdown label showing how many hours, minutes, and seconds until that date that we've entered. And of course, it'll be updating in real time so we can actually see how much time is left. So with that being said, let's get started by, as always, opening up Xcode. So let's create a new project. We're going to stick with a single view application, and we're going to call this countdown. Let's throw it on our desktop, and let's expand Xcode to get into this. Of course, don't forget to smash that like button below for daily Swift tutorials. Helps out the channel and the video a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And let's firstly pick our simulator of choice, hit Command R to build and run, and let's start talking about the various pieces we're going to need. So what I'm going to do is we're going to add a plus button up here, which will show another screen where we can enter in the date that we want. Once we enter in a date, we're going to also give that event a title. And when we hit done, we'll dismiss that screen and start showing the countdown. So let's go to our storyboard and set that jazz up. So by default, Xcode gives us this one screen, for which we're going to change the background color to black. And what we're also going to do is we are going to come up here in editor, and we're going to come here and go to embed in, and then we're going to pick NavigationController. Additionally, what we're going to do is come up here and search for a bar button item, drag it on in. Now we can see that it's text. We want to change it to a plus, so select it. For the style, we're going to keep it as that. And for the system item, we're going to change it to add. Now what we also want is another screen, aka a view controller, where we can actually select the date. So let's put this here. Let's give this a dark gray background color. If I can find gray, that looks good. Now let's also bring in a text field where we're going to enter the title for the event. Drop that guy in. Let's add some constraints by clicking on this and doing 10, 20, 20, and let's do 52, like so. Let's click in here and set a placeholder. We're going to do event name. And a placeholder, if you don't know, is just like light text that kind of signifies to the user what the field is for. Next, we want to add a date picker. So let's put the date picker in here like so. Let's change the tint color of this to white because our background is black. So first, let's see, mode, locale. So mode is date and time. That looks good. Interval is 1 minute. That looks good too. We should have a color in here. We have background and tint. So let's change tint to be white. Maybe it's not tint. I could have swore there's another property in here called color. Content mode, background, tint. Well, we'll build and run it and see what we get. But let's add some constraints to this. We're just going to say horizontally and vertical in container like so. And let's see, we need to add a label to this. Actually, we need to add a done button here too. So let's come up here and bring on in a button and drop it down there. Now let's call it save. Now this guy, let's change up the colors. Let's change the text color to be black and the background to be white. And let's apply some constraints in here by clicking this again. And we're going to do 20, 20, 20, 52. And that looks good to me. Let's bring in the label. And then after that, we're going to jump into the code and start implementing this. So that label is going to show basically the countdown. So again, we're going to add some constraints. 20, 20, 20, 20. It'll take up the whole screen. Let's set the background, or sorry, the text color to white. Center this guy. Number of lines is going to go to 0, so the line wraps. And let's also bump this font size up because it's a tad small by default. So we're going to hit this. We're going to pick semi-bold, and we're also going to bump this number a few times. Cool. Next, we need to actually add outlets so we can reference this stuff in code. And we also need to create a class that's going to represent this controller. And then we'll deal with the white color of the state picker. So first, let's come up here and do right-click, new file, Cocoa Touch class. Make sure it inherits UI view controller. And let's call this date view controller. Enter, enter. Now in here, we want a couple things. We want firstly an outlet to our field. We want an outlet, whoops, copy and paste this, to our UI date picker. And what else do we want? Do we need an outlet to the button? No, we don't. We can just use an action. So we want an action for the button. Cool. The other thing we want to do is when this new screen loads, we want to pop up the keyboard on the field by default. So we're going to say field become first responder. And we're also going to say picker.text color. I could have swore there's a text color on here. Maybe it really is just tint color. Let's stick with that and see what we get. And in here, we're going to say, well, let's implement this when we come back, actually. Let's go back to the other view controller that we got by default. And in here, we're just going to add a outlet for our label. And we're going to add an IB action for the plus button we added. Like so. And in this function, we're going to basically show the new controller. And the way we're going to do that is first do let VC equals storyboard dot instantiate controller with identifier. And we're just going to say date picker. And that's going to be as date view controller. Now, where did I get this from? I just made it up. We're going to add this as the identifier in the storyboard in a quick second. And we're going to say vc dot title equals new event navigation controller dot push vc animated true. So let's go put this into our storyboard before we forget. And if we do forget and call this function, it'll actually crash the app. So it's a very common little gotcha that people make. So make sure you click on the controller that you want to add it to up here. In here, make sure you specify the class, so date view controller, and the storyboard ID should be what we just added there. Let's also connect those controller outlets, or those element outlets, so the field to the field, the picker to the picker, and the action to the button. And we're going to pick touch up inside. And over here, let's do the same thing. So this one, we don't need to specify the ID because it was already set up for us by Xcode. But let's connect the label to the label and the action to the button. Cool. So now what we want to do is go to our date view controller. After the user taps his button, we want to check if the field has an event name in it. And we also want to grab the current date in the picker. And we want to send that content back to the first controller for it to update the label. So firstly, we're going to say if let text equals field.text. Make sure there's text in there. We want to also make sure that text is not empty. like so. So now we have text in here, and we want to say let picked datetime equals picker dot date. And we are going to add another property on here called completion handler. And this is going to be a function that the other view controller will assign so we can send the data back. If you're not familiar with this concept of sending data between controllers, I have a great video explaining this exact concept, so check that out. But basically, this is going to send back a string and a date, and that string and date being the event name and the date. So we're going to say completion handler, and we're going to say text and picked date time, like so. And we're also going to, after we've sent this content back, we're going to dismiss this controller. So we're going to say pop to root view controller animated true. That actually concludes what we need to do with this controller. Let's go back to our first one. This is a screen with a label on it. And in here, we're going to say vc.completionHandler, which is that block we just created. And we're going to say name and date in here. Let's create another function where we're going to actually handle this stuff. So we're going to say private func did, let's say create event, and it's going to have a name and it's going to have a date, like so. Make sure you do a weak self before this. This is for some memory management stuff. If you're not familiar, don't sweat it. I'll make a separate video on that actually. But in here we could do self dot did create and pass in that name and date. Make sure you actually also take this line of code and wrap it in this following code. And again, this is a little out of scope for this video, but this is how we need to do it for a threading concept. So if you're not familiar with that, again, don't sweat it. I'll make a separate video on it. But in here, what we want to do now is say self.title is the new name of the event. And now we want to actually show the date in the label. Rather, what we want to do is calculate out how many hours, minutes, and seconds are left, show that, and then start the timer. So we got a date object back, and what we need to do is figure out how many seconds are between now and that future date. The way we do that is we're going to say let difference is the current date, time interval since date, and that's the, let's call this target date. And actually we need to do this backwards. So let's see, this is going to be date, current date, time interval since this date, but this is in the future. So this number will be negative. So we need to do the opposite of this. So we want to take this future date and we're going to say time interval since current. So this will give us a positive number. And we can make sure that it is truly positive by saying it's greater than 0.0. Else we'll print out negative interval. Next, we want to calculate out how many seconds are left, or how many hours, minutes, and seconds are in this time interval. And this time interval difference thing actually returns number of seconds. This time interval since. So we are going to just divide it out by the number of seconds in an hour, minutes, and just normal seconds. So let hours equals difference over 3600. Hopefully that's right? Yeah, 60 seconds times 60, we're at 3600. Next, we're going to say, let's see, let remainder equals the difference minus hours times 3600. and that'll give us whatever is left. And we're going to say let minutes equals this remainder divided by 60. And let's copy and paste this once more. And they're going to do seconds. So we'll do the difference minus the hours now. Whoops. This is complaining because we haven't used these variables yet. And then we're going to do minutes multiplied by the number of seconds in a minute, which is 60. And that'll give us the number of seconds, actually, so we don't even need this. This will actually give us seconds. So we're basically taking the total difference, subtracting out seconds and however many full hours we have, as well as minutes, and that'll give us seconds. And let's actually just print this out in our console and see what we get, because we've written quite a bit of code and we haven't tested it. It's always a good idea to pause when you're halfway through or maybe a little into it and see if your code actually works. So let's hit Command R once this stops complaining. And let's see, this is complaining because I had a typo. Like so. And let's see, that looks good to me. Let's hit Command R. What is this warning up here? This warning is saying incorrect argument label because we changed this to target date. Now let's hit Command R to build and run and see what we got going on. Cool, so we have our white label here. We're gonna hit add. And that kind of flickered, but it should slide over quite nicely like that, like it does. And again, this is black, which is fine. It's visible, but that's why I was saying that I thought it was a text color label. But either way, not important for this video. We'll stick with this black color. But let's enter an event name up here. Let's call it birthday. And let's come down here and pick Tuesday, March 3rd at, I don't know, let's do 6:29 p.m. Sounds like a nice random date. Something we overlooked doing is we want to be able to dismiss the keyboard because the button to save is down here. So let's go to the date view controller. Whoops. To the date view controller, and in here, let's actually implement the field delegate. And what we're going to do is when the user hits the enter key on the keyboard, we're going to dismiss the keyboard. So make sure you add UI text field delegate up there. And we want the function should return true, text field, resign first responder, hit Command R once more. And let's hit plus, type in, I don't know, wedding, it's tomorrow apparently, and it'll be at 6:30 p.m. Now let's hit return on our keyboard and hit this. And okay, we sent back some data, so we have now wedding up here. The label wasn't changed, but we printed out some stuff. So let's see. So it looks like our numbers look totally wrong. So let's figure something out. So it looks like we have 36 this many hours until our event, which looks to be right. Then somehow we have a negative number of minutes and some other funkiness for the seconds. So it looks like we're on the right track, but not quite there yet. So let's figure out what we botched in here. So hours is difference. And let's actually, what we're gonna do is, because we're doing time interval since, let's take this and round this. Well, yeah, let's round this. Let's round this down to the nearest whole number. The way we do that is by wrapping this in the floor call, which is a super creative name Apple gave it to round something down. And let's see, we're gonna say if difference is greater than 0, which it is, it came in here. Our hours are 3600 difference over 3600. So that looks right to me. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. So our hours are indeed correct, and it should be an even number now because we are rounding it down. But just in case, let's make this an integer and take that away. And now this is going to complain because you cannot convert a value of double to specified type int. So let's actually add the dot zero back. And this is also going to still complain because we need to assign it to a double. So let's just leave it as a double. Let's see, this is going to complain, or this error went away, and this is the remainder, which is the difference minus hours times 3600. And that should give us however many seconds are left, and we're going to divide the remainder over 60, which should give us minutes, which looks correct to me. So let's run this one more time and see if the rounding down made a difference. And let's give this title. Let's actually pick a simpler date. Let's just do tomorrow because it'll be a nice even 24 hours. And let's pick some hours ahead. Hit enter. Hit save. And here we get 0. So basically 26.994 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. So that looks correct. The problem I'm seeing here is it's basically giving us a decimal point for number of hours where we want whole numbers. So let's do this. We actually do want this to be an integer. Let's wrap this difference as an int. And let's also divide this by a whole number. And this will actually omit the floating point because integers are whole numbers. And let's start doing that for the rest of this jazz down here too, because we do want them to be whole numbers for our actual countdown timer, as you'll see in just a second. And this is going to complain because this number difference is a double, and we need to wrap it as a integer, like so. Hit Command R once more to build and run, and let's try this one more time. So wedding, tomorrow, let's tack on a couple hours, enter, enter. Cool, 31 hours, 59 minutes, and 51 seconds. Beautiful. So that actually looks perfect to me. And now we just need to show this on a label and then start the countdown clock. So what we're going to do is we're going to say label.text equals the hours by the minutes by the seconds. And we're going to start or call a function called start timer that we're going to create. And basically, this is a really simple function that we're going to create. What we're going to do is we're going to decrement seconds if it's greater than 0. And once it gets to 0, we're going to decrement minutes, so on and so forth. Once minutes gets to 0, we're going to decrement the hour and reset that back to 60 for the seconds and continue down. The thing that's important here is we need to actually hold a reference of our hours, minutes, and our seconds, like so. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to say hours equals hours, mins equals minutes, and seconds equals seconds. Now both of these are called hours, which is why it's probably complaining. Can I assign to value hours as a let? Let's change this up here to computed hours, and take this and put this here, 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 here. And now we should still be building. So now what we need to do is use a timer to basically show, or rather call a function on a repeated basis. And what we're gonna do is in here do timer.scheduled timer with time interval, and the interval is gonna be 1 second. It is gonna repeat, and the block is gonna be block is gonna be this and this. And what we can actually do is get rid of, well, no, we can keep it in this function. I was gonna say we can get rid of this function and move this entire thing up here to make it cleaner, but let's keep our code separated just to make it cleaner. So in here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say if sex is above 0, we're gonna decrement seconds. Else if mins is greater than 0, we are going to decrement the minutes. And this is complaining because we got to do self, and then we're going to do else if hours is greater than 0, we're going to decrement the hours. So in other words, if seconds is greater than 0, we're going to say seconds equals seconds minus 1. Otherwise, we're going to say, I keep forgetting we got to do the self in here. Otherwise, in here, we're going to say self.mins equals self.mins minus 1. And keep in mind, once we decrement a minute, we need to set the number of seconds to 59 so it can continue. And we're going to say if hours is now 0, so basically if seconds is greater than 0, we're going to decrement the seconds. And what we're also going to say is at the next go around, seconds will not be greater than 0. Let's say it's 0. We're going to say if minutes are greater than 0, we'll decrement the minutes and set seconds to 59. And if hours are greater than 0, we're going to say self.hours minus 1, and we're going to say self.minutes equals 59, and same for the seconds. And the thing that I'm trying to make sure we're accounting for is once minutes hits 0, we need to go down to this hour thing and make sure that we actually get to this third block. So we're going to say if seconds is greater than 0, you could ignore the minutes and the hours, so this looks good. Else, if minutes is greater than 0 and seconds equals 0, we can decrement this. We can decrement the minutes. And here what we can say is if hours is greater than 0 and mins equals 0 and seconds equals 0, we can decrement the hour and we can update the minutes and the seconds. So hopefully that makes sense and looks correct to you all. And last but not least, of course, we need to update our actual label. So we're going to call a function and say update label, and we haven't created this yet. We're going to say private func update label. And we've actually written this code already. Let's take this up here, this label.text equals, throw that in there. And up here, don't forget to say update label as well. And I think this guy's good to go. So let's hit Command R, and it looks like we have an error down here. And this is complaining because this should be mins and seconds. Let's build and run and see what we get. Hopefully our math up here is correct and we will be in good shape. So let's hit this wedding up here, and we're gonna come down here and pick tomorrow. I'm gonna go with 10:45 a.m. Hit enter to dismiss the keyboard. hit the button, and here, look at that. So we have exactly 28 hours, 0 minutes, and this many seconds left. So you can see off the bat a bug or an improvement that we can make is make sure that if it's a 0 for any of these hours, minutes, or seconds, we essentially show 2 zeros. So let those get down to seconds, and let's see if we decrement this hour number, and this minute should go to 59. So we got 5 seconds to go. Hopefully your math isn't incorrect on it. We're at 0, 0. Beautiful. 27, 59 minutes, and 56 seconds. And once we get to the end of this timer, we haven't actually done anything, but we could do like an alert or something, maybe reset it. So yeah, this is how you build a countdown application. So there's actually apps on the App Store that have this exact functionality where they let you create one or more timers, save them, you can come back here and see it. Might be a significant date, like a wedding or a birthday or graduation or something. So yeah, let's do a really quick recap and then we'll conclude this video. So I know I jumped a little all over the place. So first and foremost, we have this view controller. We have outlets in here, or one outlet for our label. We have 3 variables for our minutes, hours, and seconds. We have this function that gets called when you tap the add button. The add button will show the new controller that we made and also assign this completion handler property we created on it. In that handler, we get the results of the entry controller, basically the title the user entered and the date they picked. That calls this function subsequently, which calculates how many hours, minutes, and seconds until that date between the current date. And I didn't really mention it, but if you just create a date object like this, it defaults the value to the current date in your current time zone. Next, we come down here, we have this function which gets called and creates a timer that gets called every second, every 1 second, and it does repeat. And in here, we basically decrement the seconds, minutes, and hours according to basically just normal time. And then we call this update label, fun stuff here, and that actually updates our label with our new variables. And let's see, in the date view controller, we have 2 outlets, one for the field, one for the picker. We set the field's delegate picker tint color, which I might have to look into later. I don't want to waste time with that in this video. We pop up the keyboard on the field, and down here we have the delegate function as well as the function that gets called when you tap the save button. We validate that there's text. We call the completion handler that's assigned on this controller from the controller that pushed it, and we dismiss this controller. Last but not least, in our storyboard, we have the first view controller. We embedded it in a navigation controller, and if you're not familiar, the navigation controller basically gives us the bar up here along with like this functionality of putting bar buttons and sliding controllers on and off. So that's what navigation controllers do. And over here we have the new controller that we added, and in here we added a field, a picker, and a button, and connected the appropriate outlets and actions. And same thing for this label and the button here. We connected the action and the outlet. So yeah, that about does it. That's our picker app, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be providing the source code on my GitHub. Check the description down below for the link to it. If you have issues implementing it yourself, if you have any errors, I mean, a quick Google search usually helps out, but feel free to leave a comment. Always happy to help. If you're new, subscribe. I do daily Swift tutorials, walkthroughs, full app videos like this one. Drop a like below if you found the video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.